Hello my friends, we're going to make this card that was inspired by Nichol Magouirk. Now I didn't have the same supplies, so here's what I'm using. I have watercolor paper, and instead of distress markers, I'm using watercolor crayons from Stampin' Up. I have a wet napkin here on my acrylic block, and an aqua painter. And then here's the stamp I'm using from an old retired Stampin' Up set called Dinner Party. I have this Avery Elle sentiment set, and I have the full descriptions on my blog. And then the leaves image I'm using from this Blissful Botanicals Lawn Fawn set, and the flower and leaf from this Dear Lizzie stamp set. So to begin, I'm going to moisten my stamp first with water, and then I'm going to use my watercolor crayons directly onto the stamp. Now here Nichol used distress markers, so she didn't have to do the moistening that I did, but because these crayons need to be moist in order to stamp, that's why I wet my stamp first. So I'm just trying to color the outline like Nichol did, and then stamp. And here's where I made my first mistake. Because I took too long coloring, it actually dried, so it didn't really stamp. So I took my mini mister and then I just spritzed my stamp. I just dabbed off a little excess water and then I stamped again, and this worked much better. So I had to make sure it stayed moist, which was a lesson learned for me. And then I just took my aqua painter and just softened the lines a bit, which was the technique that Nichol showed in her video. And I have a link to her video down below in the description and on my blog. So now I'm going to continue with this technique. I'm wetting my stamp first on my wet paper towel, and then I'm coloring it with my watercolor crayon. So this is the flower image from the Dear Lizzie stamp set. And just like Nichol, she stamped twice to get a softer image, so I did the same thing. And then here's another mistake. I used my aqua painter, which had water in the barrel, and way too much water was coming out. So it turned my flowers into a blob, as you can see. So I changed to a dry aqua painter, and I used my napkin as my palette to moisten the tip, and that worked so much better. So again, another lesson learned. Just use very little water with these watercolor crayons. So now I'm doing the same technique with these leaf images. This little one is from the Lawn Fawn set, and you can see how much easier it is for me to blend, and it does not become a blob of water. So these crayons I haven't used in ages, so take a little practice. Here again, I made another mistake. I took too long again to stamp it, so it dried a bit, but I just worked with it. And fortunately, the image of the leaf was a basic shape that I could kind of fill in. And then one more leaf image, and I'm just coloring the top of it. And then just doing, again, the same technique. Just wetting the tip of my brush on the wet napkin. And I think this looks very similar to what Nichol did. So now I'm just grounding my image. I'm taking a darker blue crayon and just very lightly coloring the bottom here. And then I liked what Nichol did on her card, where she stamped a flower off onto the side of the picture. So I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm just coloring a small portion of the flower and going to stamp it right here on the side. And then again doing the same technique with my watercolor or aqua painter. So now with a little more confidence, I'm able to stamp and color a little more faster than I did the initial image. So very easy to do. So then I let this dry overnight, and I wanted to fix that flower that was just looked too splotchy. So I just re-stamped, trying to fix it a little bit. And then now again I'm taking the dry brush and wetting it on my napkin again to spread the color. I just wanted a little more definition so it didn't look like just a blob of purple. So I'm just spreading the color a little bit. And then this was my bravery test. I wanted that picture to have a little bit more shading and a little more definition because it's really, really faint. So I took the darker blue, and as you can see, I'm just taking my little bit moist tip of my brush and touching it to get some color. And so here my lesson learned was I should have done this the first time when I stamped it while the paper was still moist, because now that I let it dry, it was very hard to blend. So I kept working at it, and it blended okay, but it was still a little too harsh of what I initially wanted. So if next time I'll do this shading ahead of time. But here's my finished image. So now I'm going to assemble my card. So I'm simply rounding the corners with the 1/4 inch setting on my corner chomper. And then this is, I believe it's Elegant Eggplant cardstock from Stampin' Up. And I'm rounding those corners as well. And then I just layered those two together. I have a top folding card base here, and I'm just going to adhere this focal image right near the top center. And then I'm taking my Hero Arts Pool ink to stamp my sentiment. I was inspired by another YouTuber who stamps her sentiments pretty much in different colors almost all the time rather than black. So I thought I'd give that a try. And then I just tied some twine up at the top in a bow. And then that finishes my card. So I hope you're inspired to try this technique. I thank Nichol Magouirk for sharing this technique on her YouTube channel, and I hope you give it a try. Thanks for watching.